The massive chamber hummed with alien voices as representatives from 12 different species argued in panic. Admiral Kim Hanna stood quietly at the human section, watching holographic displays show something that made even the bravest aliens shake with fear. A fleet of bioships moved through space like a disease spreading across the galaxy. Each ship was alive, pulsing with veins that glowed in the darkness. These were the Devourers, and they had found a new galaxy to consume. Chancellor Vexteri of the Altarians stepped forward, his crystal body shimmering with distress. The tall alien had lived for 300 years and had seen his people flee from the Devourers twice before. "The scans are confirmed," he announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. 200 bioships approach from the void. They will reach our outer colonies in 6 months. The insect-like Kefri clicked their sharp mandibles together, making sounds like breaking glass. Their ambassador, a creature twice the size of a human, with 4 arms and compound eyes, spoke in rapid clicks that the translation system converted to words. "My hive remembers the last encounter. They stripped 3 of our worlds bare. Nothing survived, not even the bacteria in the soil." Around the circular room, other aliens nodded with grim understanding. The gaseous nebulans pulsed with deep blue light, the color of mourning in their species. The proud warrior caste, Drakmori, who had never retreated from any battle, hung their massive heads in defeat. Admiral Kim Hanna had heard the stories. The Devourers consumed everything. They turned living beings into biomass to fuel their ships. They stripped planets down to bedrock, leaving nothing but empty shells floating in space. Every species in the galaxy had faced them at some point, and every species had done the same thing. They ran. "The evacuation protocols are already being prepared," Chancellor Vexteri continued. "The Andromeda Galaxy offers safe harbor. Our long-range scouts have identified suitable worlds for each species. We can begin the exodus within 3 months." The chamber filled with the sounds of acceptance. Aliens spoke in their native languages, about which ships to use, which artifacts to save, which colonies to abandon first. It was a conversation they had all had before, handed down through generations, like a terrible family tradition. Kim Hanna listened to it all with growing amazement. These were advanced civilizations. The Altarians could manipulate gravity itself. The Kefri had hive minds that could coordinate millions of individuals. The Drakmori were born warriors who lived for battle, and they were all planning to run away. Admiral Kim, Chancellor Vexteri, addressed her directly. "Your species is new to the Concord. You may not understand the full scope of this threat. The Devourers have consumed entire galaxies. Resistance is not only futile, it is meaningless." Kim Hanna stepped forward into the center of the chamber. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her, barely reaching the chest of the shortest Drakmori. Her uniform was simple compared to the elaborate dress of other species. But when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the room. "Humanity will not be joining the evacuation," she said calmly. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of the life support systems seemed to pause. 12 different species stared at the human admiral as if she had just announced her intention to breathe vacuum. "Admiral," Chancellor Vexteri's voice held a note of what might have been pity. "Perhaps you do not understand. The Devourers do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They consume everything in their path. Your bravery is admirable, but courage cannot overcome infinite hunger." The Kefri ambassador clicked rapidly, a sound that the humans had learned meant either laughter or hysteria. The humans always speak in riddles. What could your tiny species possibly do against a force that has devoured 1,000 worlds? Kim Hanna looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each alien representative. Some showed pity, others confusion. A few displayed what she recognized as the universal expression of creatures looking at something they thought was insane. "We can show them what happens when they try to consume something that refuses to be consumed," she replied. Earth has an old saying, when you have nothing left to lose, you have everything to gain. The Drakmori war leader, a massive creature covered in natural armor, leaned forward. And what do you believe you can gain from extinction, small human? Kim Hanna smiled, and something in that expression made several of the aliens step backward. It was not the smile of someone who had accepted defeat. It was not even the smile of someone who believed they could win. It was the smile of someone who had decided that winning and losing were the wrong questions to ask. We can gain the knowledge that some things in this universe are worth more than survival, she said. We can gain the certainty that when the Devourers finish with our worlds, they will remember that humans were here. And most importantly, we can gain the chance to prove that fear is a choice. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Aliens spoke rapidly to each other, trying to understand what the human had just said. But Kim Hanna was already walking toward the exit, her decision made. Behind her, the galaxy prepared to run from the approaching darkness. Ahead of her, humanity prepared to meet it head-on. Commander Park Min-ho watched the last Altarian Ark ship disappear into the swirling colors of hyperspace. The bridge of the TCS Defiance was quiet, except for the soft beeping of instruments and the gentle hum of life support systems. Through the main viewport, he could see other evacuation fleets moving away from the galaxy like scattered seeds on cosmic wind. The Kefri had taken their precious hive queens in specially built bioships. The crystalline Drakmori loaded their war eggs onto massive carriers that looked like floating cities. Even the brave Nebulans had compressed their gaseous forms into stasis containers for the long journey to safety. Only human ships moved in the opposite direction, toward the approaching threat. Sir, Lieutenant Lee Yunha called from the communications station. We're getting another message from the Altarian embassy. They say they have room for 50,000 humans on their fastest ships. Park Min-ho studied the tactical display, where red dots showed the Devourer fleet moving steadily toward the outer colonies. Each dot represented a bioship the size of a city, filled with creatures bred for one purpose, to consume everything they encountered. Tell them we appreciate the offer, he said quietly, but humanity has work to do. Down in the engineering sections, something unprecedented was happening. Chief Petty Officer Choi Jae-on was welding plasma conduits directly onto mining charges, turning industrial equipment into weapons of war. Around him, civilian engineers worked alongside military personnel, their faces dirty with grease, but bright with determination. Hand me that fusion cutter, Choi said to Dr. Yoon Suzy, the ship's xenobiologist who had volunteered to help with weapons modification. We need to attach the detonation triggers to the cargo bay doors. Dr. Yoon passed him the tool, shaking her head. The other species think we've lost our minds. They're calling it mass suicide, with extra steps. Maybe they're right, Choi replied, sparks flying from his welding torch. But crazy might be exactly what this universe needs. Across human space, similar scenes played out on every world, every station, every ship. On Mars, teenagers who were too young for military service were forging identity cards and lying about their ages to join the fight. 16-year-old Kim Dae-ho had convinced his parents he was visiting friends when he actually reported to the recruitment center. I know I look young, he told the recruiting sergeant, but I can pilot anything that flies. The sergeant, a veteran named Han Min-gi, looked at the boy's fake identification and sighed. She had 3 children of her own, all evacuated to the outer colonies. But she also understood something the other species did not. When humans decided to fight, age became just a number. Report to flight training tomorrow at 0600 hours, she said. On the mining stations around Proxima Centauri, workers were converting their industrial equipment into improvised weapons. Asteroid miners who had spent their lives breaking rocks were now learning how to break bioships. Plasma cutters became artillery pieces. Cargo haulers transformed into missile platforms. Station Chief Oh Seong-hwa supervised the modifications. with the calm efficiency of someone who had accepted the impossible. "We need the primary fusion torch mounted on the station's spine," he told his crew. "If we're going to fight these things, we might as well make it count." On Europa, in the underwater cities beneath the ice, something even more remarkable was happening. Grandparents who had never held weapons in their lives were volunteering for combat training. Elderly humans lined up to learn how to operate defense systems, how to repair damaged equipment under fire, how to make their final moments matter. 70-year-old grandmother, Park Young-suk, practiced loading ammunition into a plasma rifle with hands that shook slightly from age, but were steady with purpose. "My granddaughter is on one of the evacuation ships," she told the instructor. "If these monsters want to follow her to Andromeda, they'll have to go through me first." The galaxy watched these preparations with growing confusion and horror. Alien observers sent reports back to their fleeing governments, describing human behavior that seemed to defy logic. Ambassador Kethfer of the Altarian Confederation recorded a message for his people. "The humans are exhibiting mass psychological dysfunction. They appear to draw energy from their own anticipated suffering. Parents are saying goodbye to children as if they will never see them again, yet they smile while doing so. Most disturbing, they seem to view their impending extinction as some form of performance." On the Kefri hive ships, worker drones transmitted confused data about human activities. Their collective consciousness could not process why individual humans would choose certain death over probable survival. The hive mind worked on efficiency and logic. Human behavior made no sense to them. Even the warrior caste Drakmori found human preparations disturbing. War leader Thakmer sent a final communication to Earth. Before his species departed, humans fight like they have already died, and are trying to take their enemies with them to whatever comes after. This is not warrior behavior. This is something else entirely. But the humans continued their work. They built weapons from farming equipment. They trained children to fly fighter craft. They converted civilian facilities into military production centers. Most strangely of all, they built monuments before the battles had even begun. On Luna, work crews carved memorial walls into the rock, preparing spaces for names that would soon fill them. On Earth, children planted gardens in places where their parents expected battles to be fought, as if beauty could somehow survive destruction. The other species saw weakness in these actions. They saw a primitive species that did not understand the reality of extinction. They could not see that humans were not preparing to lose. They were preparing to make loss itself into a victory. The first Devourer bioship dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler Colony like a nightmare made real. Captain Song Ji-hoon watched it through the main viewer of Kepler Station, a converted mining platform that now bristled with weapons welded onto every available surface. The bioship was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. Its hull pulsed with veins that glowed sickly green, and thousands of feeding tentacles writhed across its surface like angry snakes. This was a creature designed by evolution to consume entire worlds, and it had done exactly that to hundreds of planets across the galaxy. Song Ji-hoon's defense force consisted of 47 crew members and 12 converted mining ships. The odds were so impossible that most military computers would have simply displayed error messages instead of calculating survival chances. "All stations, this is Captain Song," he broadcast on an open channel that reached across the galaxy. Every fleeing alien ship, every human vessel, and even the Devourer bioship could hear his words. Today, humanity makes its introduction to the Devourers. They're about to learn something important about us. The bioship launched its first attack wave. Thousands of fighter organisms poured from openings in its hull like insects from a disturbed nest. Each fighter was a living creature bred from the genetic material of conquered species, their forms perfected over millions of years of warfare. They moved in perfect formation, their shared hive mind calculating optimal attack patterns. The human Response was completely different from anything the Devourers had ever encountered. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting coordinated maneuvers, the human fighters scattered in all directions like startled birds. Each pilot made independent decisions, based on nothing more than instinct and determination. Where the Devourers expected military precision, they found beautiful chaos. Lieutenant Kong Minj, flying his first combat mission at 19 years old, laughed with pure joy as he dove his fighter directly into the bioship's main feeding array. His ship was tiny compared to the massive tentacles, but he had loaded it with every explosive device the station could spare. "Tell my parents I made it count," he shouted over the radio just before impact. The explosion tore through the bioship's primary feeding mechanism, causing chain reactions that rippled across its hull. Toxic fluid sprayed into space as the creature screamed in frequencies that human equipment could barely detect. On the station, Chief Bei Soman led a boarding party against Devourer warriors that had breached the hull. These invaders were the stuff of nightmares, creatures assembled from the best parts of a dozen conquered species, with claws that could tear through metal and reflexes faster than human thought. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They expected terror from their prey, or at least rational fear that would make the victims predictable. Instead, they found humans who sang old folk songs while fighting, who used their own blood to mark victory tallies on the walls, who seemed to fight harder when they were wounded than when they were healthy. Bei Soman faced a Devourer warrior twice her size in the station's main corridor. The creature had 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, and its mouth contained 3 rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. It moved with the confidence of a predator that had never met anything it could not kill. "Come on then," Bei said in Korean, hefting a plasma cutter that she had modified into a crude sword. "Let's see how tough you really are." The warrior charged, expecting its prey to flee or freeze with fear. Instead, Bei stepped forward to meet it, her improvised weapon carving bright lines through the darkness. When the creature's claws raked across her shoulder, she laughed and struck back harder. The battle raged through the corridors of Kepler Station for 18 hours. Human defenders fell one by one, but each death cost the Devourers more than they expected. The humans fought in ways that made no tactical sense but somehow worked anyway. Engineer Cho Min-seok jury-rigged the station's mining lasers to overload, creating a feedback pulse that fried the nervous systems of nearby Devourer organisms. When asked why he would sacrifice himself for a weapon that might not even work, he simply said, "Because someone has to try the impossible things." Dr. Nam Ji-woo, the station's medical officer, treated wounded defenders while broadcasting detailed reports about Devourer biology to the rest of humanity. Even as bio-warriors broke down her medical bay's doors, she continued transmitting data that would help other human forces. "Their neural clusters are vulnerable to electrical discharge," she reported calmly, even as claws scraped against a sealed door. "Recommend modified plasma weapons. Also, they seem confused by unpredictable behavior patterns." The final transmission from Kepler Station came from Captain Song Ji-hoon himself. The station was coming apart around him, its structure compromised by explosions and by half his crew was dead, and the other half was dying. "This is Song Ji-hoon, final log," he said into his recorder. "The Devourers have taken Kepler Station, but we made them pay for every meter. They expected us to surrender or break, but we gave them something else instead. We gave them their first real fight." The station's fusion reactor went critical 30 seconds later, taking the entire bioship with it. When the explosion faded, space was filled with drifting debris from both human and Devourer vessels. But for the first time in their species' million-year history, the Devourers had suffered losses that exceeded their gains. In their vast collective consciousness, something new stirred: uncertainty. These humans did not fight like prey. They fought like something else entirely. Admiral Kim Hanna stood on the bridge of the TCS Indomitable. humanity's last remaining battleship, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. Red dots filled the screen like drops of blood against the black of space. 200 Devourer moved steadily toward Earth, led by their mothership, a living creature the size of a small planet. "Ma'am," Commander Park Min-ho reported from his station, "our remaining forces are in position. 37 combat vessels, 16 converted cargo ships, and about 800 fighters." Kim Hannah nodded without looking away from the display. The numbers were hopeless. The Devourer fleet could have conquered their force 100 times over. But humans had stopped believing in hopeless situations months ago. "What's the status on Project Prometheus?" she asked. Chief Engineer Na Hunwoo looked up from his console, his uniform stained with grease, and his eyes bright with dangerous purpose. "The reactor modifications are complete across all vessels. We can implement Protocol Omega on your command." Protocol Omega was humanity's final answer to an impossible problem. When faced with an enemy that consumed everything it touched, humans had decided to make themselves too dangerous to swallow. Every human ship now carried modified reactors that could overload in controlled sequences. They had turned their entire fleet into bombs, but bombs that could choose when and where to explode. "Open a channel to all frequencies," Kim Hannah ordered. "I want everyone to hear this. Our own ships, the fleeing aliens, and especially the Devourers." The communications array activated, carrying her voice across space to human vessels preparing for their final battle. 2 alien arc ships fleeing toward distant galaxies, and to the approaching hive mind that had never before encountered organized resistance. "This is Admiral Kim Hannah of the Terran Coalition," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I'm speaking to anyone who's listening. The other species of this galaxy have chosen survival. They've fled to preserve their cultures, their histories, their futures. We respect that choice." On the fleeing alien ships, translators worked frantically to convert her words into dozens of different languages. Kefri drones clicked in confusion. Altarian crystals hummed with uncertainty. Even the proud Drakmori paused in their exodus to listen. "But humanity chooses differently," Kim Hannah continued. "We choose to make our stand here, not because we believe we can win, but because some things are worth more than winning. Some things are worth more than survival itself." The Devourer mothership pulsed with anticipation as it detected the human fleet ahead. Its vast biosensors analyzed the approaching vessels, calculating their biomass potential. 8 billion individual units waited on the planet behind them, enough biological material to fuel the hive for months. The collective consciousness of the Devourers had consumed 1,000 species across 100 galaxies. They understood prey behavior perfectly. Fear led to flight or surrender. Courage led to brief, futile resistance, followed by consumption. But something about these humans felt different. "We're about to show the Devourers something new," Kim Hannah announced. "They think they understand predation. They think they know what happens when an unstoppable force meets a movable object. They're about to learn the difference between hunger and fury." Behind them, Earth blazed with unusual light, not from Devourer feeding, but from controlled nuclear detonations across Luna Base. Human engineers had deliberately irradiated their own moon, making the Earth system temporarily uninhabitable even for the Devours. If the enemy wanted humanity's birth world, they would have to wait for the radiation to fade, assuming any of them survived the encounter. "All vessels," Kim Hannah ordered, "initiate Protocol Omega sequence. Time to teach these things why humans don't believe in no-win scenarios." Across the human fleet, reactor cores began building toward critical overload. But this was not simple. Self-destruction. Human engineers had spent months perfecting the art of weaponized death, turning each ship into a precisely controlled explosion that would take multiple enemies with it. On the fighter carrier Resilience, Captain Ju Haun watched her young pilots prepare for their final launch. Most of them were barely out of their teens, but they moved with the calm confidence of veterans. They had already died in their minds. Now they were just choosing how to make that death meaningful. "Remember," she told them over the squadron channel, "you're not flying to your deaths. You're flying to write the final chapter of humanity's story. Make it a good one." Lieutenant Shin Woo-jin, 21 years old, and flying a fighter held together, with spare parts and determination, replied for all of them, "Yes, ma'am. They'll remember us." The Devourer mothership launched its own fighters, millions of biocrafts that swarmed through space like a living storm. They moved with perfect coordination, guided by a collective intelligence that had never known defeat. They expected the humans to break formation, to scatter in fear, to die with dignity, if they were lucky. Instead, the human fighters charged directly into their formation, each pilot singing different songs from their childhood, their voices creating a chaotic harmony that somehow made perfect sense. The Devourers suddenly understood that they were not facing prey that had been cornered. They were facing predators that had chosen their hunting ground. The first human ship reached critical mass just as it penetrated the enemy formation. The explosion took out a dozen biofighters and sent shockwaves through the Devourer hive mind for the first time in their species' existence. The Devourers felt something they had never experienced, the fear that victory might cost more than defeat. The earth burned behind them as the human fleet raced toward the Devourer mothership, but it was not the fire of consumption. The planet glowed with the controlled radiation of Luna Base's fusion cores, making the world temporarily poisonous, even to creatures that ate entire civilizations. Admiral Kim Hanna stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as her ship dove straight toward the massive bio-construct ahead. Around her, the crew sang an old Korean song about flowers that bloomed in winter snow. Their voices were calm, almost cheerful, as if they were heading to a celebration instead of certain death. The reactor beneath their feet built steadily toward critical overload. In 30 minutes, the ship would become a nuclear flower blooming in the darkness of space. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Jin Suho reported from the communications station, "the alien fleet is monitoring our transmissions. The ALT are requesting clarification of our tactical strategy." Kim Hanna laughed, a sound that carried no fear but infinite determination. "Tell them our strategy is simple. We're going to lose so magnificently that victory becomes meaningless." The Devourer mothership loomed ahead of them like a living planet. Its surface writhed with millions of feeding tentacles, each one capable of stripping a city bare in minutes. Biosensors across its hull analyzed the approaching human vessels, trying to understand their behavior. The hive mind was confused. These creatures were not fleeing. They were not trying to escape. They were accelerating directly towards certain destruction, and they seemed happy about it. For the first time in a million years of conquest, the Devourers felt something they could not classify or understand. Doubt, Captain Lee Soyang commanded, a converted cargo hauler called the Defiant Hope. Her crew of 12 had spent the last month welding mining charges to their ship's hull. Now, as they approached the mothership's primary feeding array, she opened a bottle of rice wine that her grandmother had made. "To Earth," she said, raising the bottle toward the view screen, "and to everyone we're leaving behind." Her crew raved, their own cups in a toast. They were miners, engineers, a teacher who had volunteered when the war began. None of them were soldiers, but all of them understood what needed to be done. The Defiant Hope struck the mothership just as its improvised explosives detonated. The blast tore through dozens of feeding tentacles and sent shockwaves deep into the creature's nervous system. Across the battle, similar scenes played out as human ships found their targets. Each explosion was precisely timed, each sacrifice carefully calculated to cause maximum damage. The humans fought like they had rehearsed this dance of destruction for years. On Earth's surface, the last human defenders watched the battle through telescopes and radio transmissions. In the underground shelters of Seoul, Grandmother Park Young-suk held her great-grandson on her lap and pointed to the lights flashing in the sky. "Those are our people," she told the 4-year-old boy. "They're making sure you'll have a future to grow up in." The child did not understand the words, but he could hear the pride in her voice. Around them, other families watched the battle with quiet dignity, knowing they were witnessing the end of one story and the beginning of another. The Devourer mothership tried to adapt its tactics as more human vessels reached their targets. Its hive mind calculated new defensive patterns, redirected biofighters to intercept the suicide attacks, even attempted to communicate with the human fleet. But the humans would not be reasoned with, could not be intimidated, and refused to behave in any logical pattern. They fought like creatures that had already died and were simply choosing how to spend their final moments. Admiral Kim Hanna opened a final transmission as the Indomitable approached the mothership's central core. Her voice carried across space to every human ship, every alien refugee fleet, and deep into the Devourer collective consciousness. "Let the record show that humanity was here," she said calmly. "Let the record show that when faced with extinction, we chose how our story would end. We chose to prove that some things in this universe matter more than survival." The Indomitable struck the mothership's core just as its reactor achieved critical mass. The explosion lit up the entire solar system, visible even from the fleeing alien ships at the edge of the galaxy. The chain reactions spread through the Devourer fleet as more human vessels found their marks. Each sacrifice took multiple bioships with it, not through superior technology or firepower, but through the simple fact that humans had made themselves into weapons that the enemy could not safely consume. The surviving Devourer vessels, their hive mind reeling from losses it had never imagined possible, did something unprecedented in their species. Million-year history of conquest. They retreated, not because they could not defeat humanity. They still outnumbered the remaining human forces 100 to 1, but because victory against humans came at a cost that made triumph meaningless. 6 months later, the alien species returned from their exodus to find the solar system scarred but rebuilding. Memorial walls stretched across the lunar surface, bearing the names of everyone who had died in the war. But beside those monuments, new cities were rising. Human children played in gardens planted among the ruins, their laughter echoing through halls built to honor the dead. Ambassador Kethfer of the Altarian Confederation filed his final report. "The Devourers have moved beyond our galaxy, seeking easier prey. They remember humanity not as a species they conquered, but as a species that made conquest itself a hollow victory. The galaxy is safe because humans were willing to redefine what safety means.